Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening to the Tide store here in Old Street for Tide Talk number 6, I think it is, with Sohaib. Sohaib is the editor and co-founder of Courier, which is sort of listed as the media business at the heart of startup culture, but some people think of it as the FT for startups. It's an organization that's 3 years old, but Sohaib himself has been working on mission, media and message in one way or another for of the order of 15 years. I think he was previously he's been a trade journalist and he's been a communications professional as well. So he's done a whole load of stuff in this space. I'm George, I'm the founder of Tide. Tide, as you know, is the business banking service which exists exclusively to save small businesses time and money. And I've certainly experienced wasting a lot of my own time and indeed companies' money on screwing up communications. So I feel really grateful that we are going to have the opportunity to listen to Sohaib this evening. So without any more ado, I'll hand it straight over. Sohaib.
Thank you. Thanks, George. Okay, thanks for coming as well, by the way. I really appreciate you guys wanting to hear what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to just spend a few seconds talking about Courier so you have a bit of context about what we do in our background. So the whole premise, as George said, what Courier is all about is we think startup culture is changing the world in a very meaningful and enduring way. So there's a lot talked about startup and a lot of the words around it, but the meaningful things for us is technology has been obviously a driving force for enabling businesses like Tide and the customers of Tide as well. So the having back-end infrastructure, but also the social media platforms that enable a business that operates out of a bedroom to actually be a global business is a relatively modern phenomenon. There's also something economic, the fact that out of a global economic crisis, lots of people questioned the idea of career stability, their job prospects, and thought, actually, do you know what, the relative security of a career isn't what I assumed it was. And there's also something cultural as well for us, which is that the idea of what it takes to build a business, even big or even quite small, is changed by these sort of modern heroes. People who build a, innocent juice business doesn't look like, they don't look or sound or have the values of these old-fashioned kind of entrepreneurial figures. And we think combined that's something massive, and the statistics really bear that out as well. And it's something really motivating for me and my business partner Jeff as well. So when you look at it, there are now 5.5 million businesses in the UK. That's been growing 3% from, I think it's something like 2000. So since 2000, every year there's an average of 3% growth on the number of businesses in the UK. And that's replicated in other Western countries as well. And if you think about it, that's a phenomenal growth through a massive economic crisis that is beyond through peaks and troughs that would have otherwise happened. And just to give another little fact before I move on, we see now 1 in 7 people who are working in the UK is now self-employed. And obviously the stuff with the government trying to think how they tax this shift is a reflection of just how big and enduring I think that is. So anyway, that's a little bit about the context of Courier. We, like George said, we want to be a media business at the heart of startup culture. That was an ambition for us in what we wanted to do when we set out. We had these principles which we thought would work for us, and the reason this is also relevant when you think about mission, media and messaging is we thought it was very important for us to set out what we thought was important, and those values of being authoritative, being authentic and having our own attitude we thought is extremely important for us as we distinguish ourselves from the other media brands that are out there and to have real cut through amongst our audience. So it brings us on to sort of mission, messaging, mission and media. Now, I might have a slightly contrarian view on this, and I didn't realise George was going to give the full gamut of my sort of personal history, but I did start out as a journalist, and then I thought I had to get a real job, which is to work in a big corporation in terms of in corporate communications and stuff. And then after that, starting Courier more recently. And when you look at these three areas, and when we're talking about what we're going to talk about today, it was kind of creating a compelling story for media was the sort of subject that was kind of the brief for it. Now, when I look at those three, I actually think the first one is problematic for a startup because it can actually, this is the kind of more typical thing companies are told to do, work out your messaging. And I think that the slight reason it falls down for me is that a startup sometimes, or a small business, can get bogged down in the theory of messaging structures that big companies kind of follow, and you almost risk becoming quite sterile in doing that. And then if you come to the last one, which is media, now this whole talk could be dominated by the problems of media and journalists and all the rest of it. But just to give you an idea, I think it's worth thinking about the day of a typical journalist today and thinking how you can kind of connect your story to media. So they come into the office, they've got to hit a number of stories over the course of a day. There is pressure on quantity, and then there's pressure on the amount of traffic that story can hit because of most companies are now online. And within that context, most journalists end up being in a bit of a loop because you think, I know a story about Uber will get me traffic. I know that's what somebody's talking about. I know there's somebody at the end of a phone that I can call to do that. And then it takes a certain level of courage to break that, and it also takes an editor to take that story, to take a story that you feel is different and go, listen, I know you've not heard of this company, and I know this is something that might not connect with you, but let me sell it to you. And that is really hard when you've got to hit lots of stories over the course of a day. I also think, from a startup point of view, do you know what? Sod the media. There's a part of it of you can become caught up in knots and trying to make your story connect with the media, which is why I think the most important thing is mission. And a real privilege for me in my job today is over the last 2-3 years, we've met some amazing entrepreneurs and seen some incredible businesses. And the one thing that stands out for me is very, very few have what I would call a really clear mission. Like, I'd almost count them on one hand. A company with a mission that is really clear, and almost all of them actually don't think about messaging and media. They just think about their mission. And because it's so strong, the media almost reacts in it, and they kind of get their attention. And I mean, I really believe that. And I think the really powerful thing in that is the actual audience for mission is the founder of the business, who's actually, because running a business, and I can say from both with an editor's hat on, but also as a co-founder hat on, it's really hard to actually motivate yourself day in, day out, and think, you do have these, in the middle of getting beaten up by every little challenge that hits you over the course of a day, week, year, whatever, having a mission is an extremely motivating force because it constantly brings you back to why you're doing it. So I really believe in that sense of what a mission really is. And also it comes back to another point, which is this authenticity thing. And it's such a rare thing today to find really authentic businesses. And it's almost a derided word, and it's kind of abused and kicked around because of how people have understood what authenticity really is. But I think if you've got an authentic mission, the power of it is enormous. And I'll put this picture in just to give a sense of how crowded everything is. So to have a story, there's lots of everything. There's lots of businesses. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of products. And your business and product has to compete with everything out there. And to do that, and also to think who your audience is, I think it's customers, obviously, but it's also staff, like from, again, with a sort of co-founder hat on rather than an editor hat on, and it's also investors. And against that sort of mass of things that you're up against, having a mission, I think, is like a magnet for the best talented staff. And we've been consistently overwhelmed by when you see incredibly talented people leave highly paid, prestigious jobs to work at a tiny company with a massive amount of risk on low pay, with a risk that company is going to go under just because the mission is so appealing. And also just being aware that people are pretty jaded, overwhelmed and exhausted out there. Having that mission is extremely compelling. And you know, to think how elusive it is and how precious it is, it's very easy to say, and just as a jumping off point, I mean, it's a very tired example, but Simon Sinek's book, Why, I think he's written a lot about kind of the power of why and inverting the sort of what, how, why, and starting with why. And his whole premise is that it's not what you do, but why you do it. And I'd really encourage anybody who's kind of curious about this stuff to check out what he's done, because he expresses it way more articulately than I could. And again, just to come back to something that I touched on before, I think a lot of it comes down to founder and the leader and the idea of the authentic leader. And I've used Jurgen Klopp as an example. I'm not a massive Liverpool fan or anything. I'm not a Liverpool fan at all. But I think there's something in having messianic leaders, or even a step back from that, just somebody who is that authentic leader who talks with clarity and honesty and a sense of purpose about what we're doing today. You know, why we've opened the doors to the shop, sort of thing, and what we're motivated to do. And I think it's unbelievably powerful, and it can actually it's one of those things where, especially as a small business, you've got a unique quality in communicating authenticity in a way your competitors in big companies can't. And like I say, I've been very lucky to come across lots of companies, and I'm just going to touch on 3 that I think capture the qualities that I think are really powerful. And like the Liverpool thing, I'm not a customer or a particular fan of this brand, but it's really difficult to argue with what is inside Rapha. And I don't know if you know, it's a cycling brand. There are lots of them. They charge very high prices for cycling gear, and there's lots of cycling brands. But when you talk to their founder, it's a guy called Simon Mottram. His mission is he wants to make cycling the most popular sport in the world. And without even meeting him, you can feel that in shops, in products, in the decisions they make. So they make films. They have these enormous cycling communities. People gather together, pay £135 a year for a membership card just to be part of a cycling community. And when he doesn't necessarily have the best cycling equipment or tops or whatever, but there is such a power in the brand, in the fact that they really desperately want to move cycling. It's beyond being a great business. They want to make cycling the most popular sport in the world. Another one, and George, apologies if there's a competitor, but I don't think it is. Good. Now, I'm really struck by Monzo, because there are 4 consumer digital banks out there that were kind of trying to start out, and you talk to all of them, there's similarities in technology, and they've all got the similar challenges. Tom Blomfield, the founder, he seems to hate banks, the mainstream banks, with a level of passion and what they represent and how they're sort of hurting the consumer experience. And it stands out. It comes through and it cuts through to people, and people are on waiting lists to get one of these cards, and they want to join and they want to invest. And I think that all stems from the passion and desire of the founder that's beyond being a very good bank with an app or whatever. And last one, also linked here, is Appear Here. So I might be right in thinking you've got this is an Appear Here space. Now, the really interesting thing is they didn't invent the idea of pop-up, and they weren't the market leader either. And as it happens, the market leader, I think it's a company called We Are Pop-Up, isn't around today. And Appear Here is growing and growing and growing. And I think the difference for me is Ross Bailey, the founder. Now, he actually hates the word pop-up, and he actually winces and cringes when you use that word, because for him, there's something bigger that he's trying to do. And I think that's why he's got the investment. That's why he's managed to persuade reluctant landlords to give him space. That's why he's getting companies as big as Topshop and as small as Tide or new as Tide to kind of take space, because he believes in something meaningful and different, and he has a purpose that he's trying to achieve. And I mean, those examples for me are really inspiring, and it's actually inspired and kind of influenced us as well to think, so, you know, like, what about our mission? And we talked about, I mentioned in the beginning, things like, you know, we want to be the FT for startup, or to be a media brand at the heart of startup culture. And if I'm honest, I don't think that's good enough. And although that's really interesting, increasingly, literally in the last few months, me and my business partner have been talking about when we did our kind of review at the end of the year, and we've got all this stuff that we want to do this year. It's all very exciting and pretty scary at the same time. The truth is, we want to kind of inspire and enable entrepreneurship in a way that's authentic and authoritative and exciting. And the interesting thing in that is, however that sounds, you can kind of agree or disagree, that isn't supposed to be an external line that we tell people about. It's actually just for us, and it's a reference point that we come back to go, and it's been really helpful. It's been really motivating for us. It helps make decisions, weirdly, because you go, okay, that idea that someone's come up with, or we've thought of, does that really push the dial of enabling and inspiring a better entrepreneurship, and, you know, with the quality of businesses that we can enable and inspire through the work we do? Yeah, actually it does, or no. And it's a really good reference point. And it also, the staff thing I keep coming back to is the most important audience for us at the moment as a growing business. And the media part, do you know what? That's just a positive outcome. If that, we think that will connect with people if and when we need to, because that it jumps out to being just another media business. So anyway, I didn't have lots to say about that, but that was my kind of relevance to us, and it's the truth as well. Like, we really believe this stuff around mission being really important. And there's a little plug that beyond the magazine, we've started an email very much out of appraising what would be everything from a podcast to launching in America or whatever, and this felt like the next big thing we do, and the format we've done it, and the traction and growth has been mind-blowing for us since we started it in November. And that's it. So thank you very much for hearing me talking about messaging, media, and mission.
Great, thank you so much, Saheb.
When you look at what you're going to cover, I mean, you have such a wide range of possibilities, and in general, you pick, it seems like a different topic to feature every issue. Yeah. How do you actually decide what you're going to cover with all of this these possibilities?
I'm going to be really difficult. I genuinely can't answer that, because there isn't a kind of really great system or anything. We are a really small team, actually, so an editorial team. So we do a weekly email, we produce that magazine. We're actually going to upgrade the magazine later this year as well. And we talk a lot, frankly. You know, as a team, we talk a hell of a lot, and things will come up, and every now and then you can feel something being a massive thing that connects with us. So it is a bit of a jump, and it is a bit of a challenge for us to go, look, the issue prior to that, the cover line was, can startups save the NHS? And to go from that to street food, it is a bit of a jump, but the belief it is underpinned with for us is that there are lots of people curious like we are, and don't want things to be dumbed down, but at the same time presented with sort of pop sensibility to it. But yeah, I wish I could answer that with something a bit more structured, but there isn't.
We've got another question.
You mentioned you receive 10, 20 press releases a day. Is there any brand who's approached you in a different way that's really caught your attention? And also, what's your, I guess, biggest annoyance or biggest cliche that you see from brands approaching you about their launch or their latest news that just kind of turns you off straight away?
The second thing, the most frustrating thing, is a really, really long press release and with a lot of rambling stuff in it. So if it was just a sentence, which often it can be reduced to, that would be brilliant, because, for obvious reasons. The other really amazing, on the first one, the most impressive thing is when the CEO sends something. Not necessarily the CEO, actually. It's somebody, when it's not managed, when it feels less boilerplated, or whatever the word is, it's kind of less templated press release. And it's kind of, again, just feels a bit more direct, and that does happen. And again, it's a bit like the authenticity thing. Not all great companies have a mission, and not all companies with a mission are great. It just gives you, I think there's just an advantage in there, perhaps.
I think we're probably out of questions unless anyone's got another one. So, we've done very well. Thank you so much for spending the time to answer all those questions as well. Really appreciate it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.